The creak of the door echoed through the small apartment, making Michael instinctively shrink back. His large brown eyes fixed on the entrance, waiting with a mix of fear and resignation. The smell of alcohol preceded his father's staggering figure. "Where's dinner, kid?" The rough, harsh voice cut through the silence. Michael, only 10 years old but carrying the weight of the world on his small shoulders, replied softly, There's no food, Dad. The money ran out yesterday." The sound of breaking glass made the boy shrink even more. His back pressed against the cold kitchen wall, a conditioned reflex from years of abuse. Useless. The shout reverberated off the thin walls. "Your mother was right to leave. You're good for nothing." The words cut deeper than any physical blow. Michael closed his eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. In his mind, he transported himself far away, to a place where laughter replaced shouts, where hugs didn't hurt. The apartment, once a home, had become a prison of painful memories. On the peeling walls, Michael could see the ghosts of happy moments, rare but precious. A dusty photo on the shelf showed a smiling family, mother, father, and a bright-eyed Michael. Now, that image seemed to belong to another life, another boy. "Tomorrow, you're going out to get money, you hear me?" His father's voice brought him back to harsh reality. "And don't come back empty-handed, or you'll deal with me." Michael nodded silently, knowing that words would only make things worse. As his father collapsed onto the worn-out sofa, the boy quietly slipped to his corner, a thin mattress on the floor of what should have been his room. Lying in the darkness, Michael hugged the only toy he had left, a worn-out teddy bear, a gift from his mother before she left. Whispering to the bear as if it were his only confidant, he murmured, "One day we'll get out of here. One day we'll be truly happy." With those words of hope, Michael closed his eyes, trying to ignore the snores coming from the living room and the shouts that still echoed in his mind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pains, but also, perhaps, a chance for change. Michael watched the fine rain through the fogged window, recalling that fateful night a year ago. The sound of slaps and screams still echoed in his memory, mixing with the noise of the drops against the glass. "Mom, please don't go," he whispered to himself, repeating the words he had shouted that night. The image of his mother, her face stained with tears and blood, still haunted him. She had looked back one last time, her eyes filled with pain and regret, before disappearing into the darkness. The creak of the door brought him back to the harsh reality. His father staggered in, reeking of cheap alcohol and smoke. "Hey, kid. Where's the money?" he barked, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Michael. The boy trembled, reaching into his pocket. I only got this today, Dad," he murmured, extending a few crumpled bills. His father snatched the money from his hand. "This isn't even enough to start. Are you stealing from me, you useless brat?" Michael backed away, his back against the wall. "No, Dad. I swear. People, they weren't buying today." A slap cut through the air, hitting the boy's face. "Liar. Just like your mother." Silent tears streamed down Michael's face as he curled up, shielding himself from more blows. "Tomorrow, you're staying on the street until you get double this, got it?" his father growled, already turning to leave. "And don't come back without the money, or you'll sleep on the street." The door slammed, leaving Michael alone again. He slid down the wall to the floor, hugging his knees. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Michael was already on the streets, his box of candies hanging around his neck. His stomach rumbled. He hadn't eaten since the day before. "Candies. Fresh candies," he shouted, his small voice almost drowned out by the noise of traffic. The hours dragged on. Some people rushed by, others looked at him with pity, but few stopped to buy. "Please, ma'am," Michael begged a well-dressed woman. "It's only 2 reis." The woman hesitated, looking at the boy's marked face. For a moment, Michael saw a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Where's your mother, dear?" she asked softly. Michael swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her absence. She left." The woman sighed, reaching for her wallet. "Here, keep the change," she said, handing him a 10 reis note. Thank you. Michael exclaimed, a rare smile lighting up his tired face. As the woman walked away, he pressed the note to his chest. It was a small ray of hope in his dark world, but Michael knew it wouldn't be enough. The streets awaited him, relentless, and at home, his father's wrath awaited. Each day was a struggle for survival, a test of his resilience against a world that seemed determined to break him. In the noisy classroom, Michael huddled in his desk, trying to become invisible. His eyes fixed on his scribbled notebook, avoiding the gaze of everyone around him. His worn and stained uniform contrasted with the clean clothes of his classmates. Claire, the teacher, watched the boy with growing concern. Her experienced eyes noticed the bruises poorly hidden under his long sleeves, even in the heat of the morning. "Michael, can you come here for a moment?" Claire called gently after class. The boy approached hesitantly, head down. "Is everything okay at home?" she asked, her voice soft. Michael nodded quickly, not raising his eyes. "Yes, teacher." Claire sighed, sensing the lie in the tremor of his voice. Before she could press further, the shrill voice of Lucas, the class bully, cut through the air. "Hey, Stinky! Don't forget to take a shower tomorrow." Lucas shouted, provoking laughter from the other students. Michael shrank even more, his hands gripping the hem of his dirty shirt. "Lucas, that's unacceptable." Claire reprimanded sternly. "Apologize right now." Lucas rolled his eyes. "Sairi, Mick. But it's true, isn't it?" The laughter increased, echoing through the hallways. Michael felt tears burn his eyes, struggling not to let them fall. "Can I go now, teacher?" he murmured, barely containing the tremor in his voice. Claire nodded reluctantly, her heart breaking for the pain evident in the boy's eyes. As Michael hurried away, she watched him, noticing how he dodged the accidental touch of other students. During recess, Claire found Michael alone in the courtyard, hidden behind a tree. "Michael," she called softly, approaching him. "You don't have to go through this alone. If something is wrong, you can tell me." For a moment, it seemed like Michael might open up. His lips trembled, his eyes filled with tears. But then, as if a curtain had fallen, his face closed up again. "Nothing's wrong, teacher. I just didn't sleep well," he replied mechanically. Claire felt her heart ache. Michael's silence was deafening, filled with secrets and pain she couldn't reach. As the bell rang, signaling the end of recess, she saw Michael rise slowly, as if carrying the weight of the world on his small shoulders. "Remember, Michael," she said as he walked away. "You're not alone." But Michael was already gone, blending into the crowd of students, once again becoming invisible, carrying with him a silent cry that no one seemed to hear. The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the small apartment in terrifying flashes. Michael was huddled in his usual corner, trembling not just from the cold, but from fear. His father had come home drunker than usual, his eyes filled with a fury Michael knew all too well. "Where's the money, you useless brat?" his father's deep voice thundered, momentarily overpowering the sound of the rain. Michael stammered, I couldn't sell anything today, Dad. It was raining and..." The sound of shattering glass interrupted his explanation. The bottle of cheap whiskey had smashed against the wall, mere inches from his head. "Liar!" the man roared, advancing with heavy steps. "You're hiding the money from me, aren't you?" Calloused hands grabbed the collar of Michael's shirt, lifting him off the ground. The smell of alcohol was nauseating. "Please, Dad," Michael pleaded, tears streaming down his bruised face. "I swear I don't have anything." A violent slap silenced his pleas. Michael tasted the metallic tang of blood in his mouth. "You're just like your mother. Weak." "A liar," his father spat, throwing the boy to the floor with force. In that moment, something inside Michael broke. It wasn't just the usual fear, but a sudden and painful realization. He couldn't stay there anymore. Taking advantage of his father's momentary distraction as he staggered in search of another bottle, Michael crawled to his hiding spot. With trembling hands, he grabbed the worn backpack where he kept his few belongings. His heart pounded as he sneaked toward the door. A deafening thunderclap masked the creak of the hinges. "Where do you think you're going?" His father's voice froze him in place. Michael turned slowly, his eyes wide with terror. His father advanced, an expression of hatred contorting his features. There was no time to think. With a scream muffled by the roar of the storm, Michael dashed through the door, his bare feet slapping against the cold floor of the hallway. "Get back here, you brat!" The furious shout echoed behind him, but Michael didn't look back. He stumbled down the stairs, his heart threatening to leap out of his chest. The sound of heavy footsteps and curses pursued him, growing fainter with each step. When he finally reached the street, the rain hit him like 1,000 icy needles. But Michael didn't stop. He ran like he had never run before, his tears mixing with the rain on his face. The darkness of the night swallowed him, the deserted streets silently witnessing his desperate escape. Michael ran without direction, leaving behind the only world he knew, plunging into an uncertain and terrifying future. The storm raged around him, echoing the turmoil in his young heart. Where would he go? What would he do? In that moment, all he knew was that he couldn't go back. The dark and hostile streets of the city stretched out before him, promising unknown dangers but paradoxically, offering the only hope of escaping the hell he called home. The sun rose timidly, its weak rays struggling to pierce the heavy clouds of the previous night. Michael walked aimlessly, his bare feet cut by the shards of glass and stones on the streets. His soaked clothes clung to his thin body, shaking uncontrollably from the cold and exhaustion. His eyes, red and swollen from crying, could barely stay open. Each step was a Herculean effort, his body begging for rest, but fear drove him on. Claire was driving to school, her thoughts already on the lesson she would give soon. It was then that her eyes caught a familiar figure on the sidewalk. Braking abruptly, she looked incredulously out the car window. "Michael!" she called, disbelieving. The boy looked up, his eyes reflecting a mix of fear and relief at recognizing his teacher. Claire quickly got out of the car and approached him carefully. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" Michael opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Instead, his fragile body began to shake violently, the tears returning in full force. Claire, moved by a maternal instinct, wrapped the boy in her arms. Michael tensed for a moment, unaccustomed to a gentle touch, before collapsing in sobs against her. "It's all right now," Claire murmured, feeling her heart break. "You're safe." Carefully, she guided Michael to the car. "We're going to my house. You need dry clothes and warm food." During the drive, Claire cast worried glances at Michael, who remained silent, huddled in the passenger seat. Upon arriving, Claire gently led him inside. "I'll get towels and dry clothes. Stay here, okay?" Michael nodded weakly, his eyes wandering around the unfamiliar environment like a cornered animal. Minutes later, wrapped in a soft towel and wearing borrowed clothes from Claire's teenage son, Michael sat at the kitchen table. A steaming cup of hot chocolate sat in front of him. "Michael," Claire began softly, sitting beside him. "Can you tell me what happened?" The boy looked at the cup, his hands trembling slightly as he held it. I couldn't stay there," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "He was going to kill me this time." Claire felt a wave of anger and protectiveness wash over her. "Who, Michael? Who was going to hurt you?" "My dad," he replied, so softly that Claire could barely hear. "He drinks, and gets angry, and—" His voice faltered, the tears falling again. Claire gently held Michael's hand. "You're safe here. No one is going to hurt you, I promise." For the first time since she found him, Claire saw a glimmer of hope in the boy's eyes. It was fragile, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "What's going to happen to me now?" Michael asked, the fear evident in his voice. Claire took a deep breath, knowing the road ahead would be difficult. "I don't know exactly, Michael. But I promise I'll do everything I can to help you. You're not alone in this fight anymore." As the sun rose higher in the sky outside, inside that cozy kitchen, a small ray of hope began to shine in Michael's troubled life. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel something beyond fear, the possibility of a better tomorrow. The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster for Michael. The social services office, with its beige walls and posters about children's rights, became a familiar place. Michael sat, small and scared, while adults discussed his future. "Michael dear," said Sarah, the gentle-voiced social worker, "we're doing everything to ensure your safety." Claire was always by his side, a constant and comforting presence. On a particularly difficult afternoon, after hours of painful questions, Michael finally broke down. "Why didn't anyone help me before?" he sobbed, his body shaking. "Why did they let that happen?" Claire hugged him tightly, silent tears streaming down her own face. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry you had to go through all that alone. But now we're here. You're not alone anymore." The weeks dragged on. Michael alternated between moments of hope and panic attacks. At night, nightmares haunted him, and he woke up screaming, certain that his father would come for him. On a sunny morning, Sarah arrived with a cautious smile. "Michael, Claire, we have news." Michael's heart raced. Claire squeezed his hand gently. "The adoption has been approved," Sarah announced. "Claire, if you still want, Michael can officially be your son." The silence that followed was broken by Claire's stifled sobs. "Of course I want," she whispered, looking at Michael with love. "More than anything in the world." Michael stood still, processing the information. Years of abuse had left him distrustful of any kindness. You really want me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Oh, Michael," Claire pulled him close, "since the first day. You've been my son in my heart for a long time." That night, in his new room at Claire's house, Michael allowed himself, for the first time, to feel truly safe. But the shadow of the past still lingered. Weeks later, Claire found Michael huddled in the corner of his room, trembling. "He's going to come back," the boy murmured, his eyes wide with fear. "He always comes back." Claire knelt beside him. "Michael, look at me," she said softly. "Your father has been arrested. He can't hurt you anymore." "Arrested?" The word came out as an incredulous whisper. Claire nodded. "The police took him. He'll answer for everything he did to you and your mother." Michael absorbed the information slowly. Years of terror don't disappear overnight. But there, on the floor of his new room, in the arms of his new mother, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. Each day brought new challenges, but also small victories. Michael's first genuine smile. The first night without nightmares. The first timidly whispered, "I love you," to Claire. On a quiet afternoon, while Claire helped Michael with his homework, he suddenly stopped. "Claire," he called, hesitant. "Yes, dear. Can I call you Mom?" The pencil fell from Claire's hand, tears welling up in her eyes. "Oh, Michael. Nothing would make me happier." As they embraced, both knew that the road ahead would still be long and difficult. The scars of the past wouldn't magically disappear. But now, for the first time, Michael had something he'd never had before: a true home, and the unconditional love of a mother. Years passed, and Michael, now an 18-year-old young man, sat at the kitchen table, piles of university brochures spread out before him. His eyes, once filled with fear, now shone with determination. Claire entered the kitchen, noticing her son's concentrated expression. "Still deciding, dear?" Michael looked up, a shy smile on his lips. "I think I've decided, Mom." Claire's heart still warmed every time he called her that. "And what's the decision?" "I want to be a doctor," Michael replied, his voice firm. "I want to help children like me." Claire sat beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Michael, that's wonderful. But you know it won't be easy, right? The studies, the memories." Michael nodded, his eyes clouding with painful memories. "I know. But..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Remember that little girl at the children's hospital? The one we saw when I went for my routine exams?" Claire nodded, remembering the frightened child in the waiting room. "I saw the fear in her eyes, Mom. The same fear I had." Michael's voice trembled slightly. "And I realized that I want to be there. I want to be the person who says it's all right now, and really makes it happen." Silent tears streamed down Claire's face. "Oh, Michael. I know it's going to be hard," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "I know I'll have to face my own demons every day. But if I can save just one child from what I went through, it will be worth it." Claire hugged him tightly, her heart overflowing with pride and love. "You're going to be an incredible doctor, my son." The years of college were a constant battle. There were nights when Michael woke up screaming, his nightmares from the past mixing with the stress of his studies. There were days when the weight of his memories seemed impossible to bear. During his first internship at the children's hospital, Michael froze when he saw a child with suspicious bruises. His supervisor, Dr. Anderson, noticed his hesitation. "Everything okay, Michael?" Michael took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "Doctor, I think this child is being abused." Dr. Anderson looked at him with curiosity. "What makes you think that?" "The bruises, the way she's cowering, the fear in her eyes," Michael explained, his voice low. "I recognize the signs." The older doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "Michael, you have a unique perspective here. Use it. But remember, You're not that scared child anymore. Now, you're the protector." Those words echoed in Michael's mind as he approached the child's bedside. Kneeling to be at eye level, he smiled gently. Im Dr. Michael. Can I talk to you for a little bit?" The girl nodded timidly, her eyes filled with the same fear Michael knew so well. "You know," he began softly, "when I was little like you, I was scared too. Scared to tell others what was happening to me. But I learned that there are people who want to help, who can make the pain stop." The child's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and hope appearing in them. "Do you want to tell me something?" Michael asked gently. "I promise I'll believe you and do everything to protect you." In that moment, as the girl began to speak, her voice trembling, Michael felt that all his suffering, all his struggle, had led him exactly where he needed to be. There, in that hospital room, he wasn't just treating a patient. He was healing a wounded soul, just as his own had once been. Years later, Dr. Michael Smith stood before a crowd of eager faces, the sun shining brightly on the newly erected sign that read Hope Haven Clinic. The clinic was a beacon of hope for children who had suffered abuse and neglect, a place where they could find solace and healing. As he cut the ribbon, a wave of applause washed over him, but his mind was elsewhere. Inside his office, a framed photograph hung prominently on the wall. It was a picture of Claire, her arms wrapped tightly around him, her smile radiating warmth and love. The photo was a constant reminder of the darkest nights and the promise of a new dawn. It was his mission in life to be that hope for the children who needed it most. As the crowd dispersed and the ceremony came to a close, Dr. Smith retreated to his office. He sat down at his desk, his eyes drawn to the photograph. He reached out, gently tracing the outline of Claire's face with his fingertips. "Claire," he whispered, his voice filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "This is for you. For all the children who need a safe haven." A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, his voice steady. The door creaked open, revealing a young woman with a clipboard in hand. "Dr. Smith, the first group of children is ready for their initial assessments. Would you like to meet them now?" Dr. Smith nodded, standing up from his desk. "Yes, please. Let's get started." As he walked down the hallway, the sound of children's laughter filled the air. It was a sound that brought both joy and a pang of sadness to his heart. He knew that behind those smiles, there were stories of pain and trauma. He entered the playroom, where a group of children was gathered. They looked up at him with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Dr. Smith knelt down to their level, his eyes softening as he smiled at them. "Hello everyone," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm Dr. Smith. I'm here to help you feel better and to make sure you have a safe place to play and learn." A little girl with pigtails and a shy smile stepped forward. "Are you going to make the bad dreams go away?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Smith's heart found for her. He reached out, gently taking her hand. "I'm going to do everything I can to help you feel safe and happy again," he promised. The little girl nodded, her eyes filling with hope. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little stronger. As the day wore on, Dr. Smith met with each child, listening to their stories, offering comfort and reassurance. He knew that the road to healing would be long and difficult, but he was determined to be there every step of the way. Later that evening, as the clinic quieted down and the children were tucked safely into their beds, Dr. Smith returned to his office. He sat down at his desk, his eyes once again drawn to the photograph of Claire. "Claire," he murmured, his voice filled with emotion. "I wish you could see this. I wish you could see the difference we're making in these children's lives." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small worn notebook. It was filled with notes, drawings, and letters from the children he had helped over the years. He flipped through the pages, a small smile playing on his lips as he read their words of gratitude and hope. "Dr. Smith, you are the best doctor ever," one letter read. "Thank you for making me feel safe again." He closed the notebook, his heart filled with a mix of sadness and pride. He knew that his work was far from over, but he also knew that he was making a difference. As he stood up to leave, he paused one last time in front of the photograph. "Good night, Claire," he whispered. "I love you." With that, he turned off the light and stepped out into the hallway, ready to face whatever challenges the next day might bring. For Dr. Michael Smith, every day was a new opportunity to bring hope and healing to the children who needed it most. And he was determined to never give up, no matter how dark the night might seem.